So I want to talk today about functional strength training and really focusing more on training movement patterns over training very specific muscles. You hear all the time people are like, "Oh, I'm doing functional training, I'm doing functional training," but from an outsider's perspective, it looks like just like HIIT training, right? It looks like boot camp classes. It looks like high intensity interval training. It doesn't look very different from what the common the common class looks like, right? And so I wanted to talk through really the idea of training very specific movement patterns over just building muscle or strength training in general, right? We look at like bodybuilding, right? Bodybuilding is a type of training style where you are very specifically trying to make a muscle look very defined, look a very certain way, because essentially you have to get on stage and show off that musculature. You basically have to look like a statue, right? Which is why they get like super tanned up. It's like paint. I had a friend once do it, and she had to like basically paint her entire body. But when looking at like a bodybuilding style routine, you're training very specific muscle groups, which is why they do mostly like split routines over anything else, or they do upper lowers, chest and back. They do what we call a bro split or a regular split routine. But when we're talking about actual functional training, right, functional exercise, we want to look at training your movement patterns. Okay, so when we're talking about functional movement patterns, there are like 6 primary movement patterns that we go through every single day, whether we realize that we're going through them or not, right? A squat, a lunge, a hinge, some kind of push pull, and then some kind of core movement, right? Either an anti-rotation or a rotational movement. Some people say a carry. It all basically boils down to like a core exercise, right? And so when you're looking at the specifics of that functional or the human movement patterns, right? A squat is getting in and out of a chair. That's a squat. Lunging translates to walking. Hinging is picking something up off the ground, or just picking something up in general. And then you look at your push or your pull, right? I'm pushing myself away from the desk, or I'm pulling myself into the table, whatever it might be. And then core is just, it's core, it's spinal health, it's midline stability. It basically is your kind of like your powerhouse, right? Like your power comes from your core. If you didn't have a core, you would just essentially be arms and legs and a head. And so your core basically is kind of the center, right, that connects all of these things and helps kind of drive all of these other patterns to happen. And so when we talk about actually functional training, we talk about training those movement patterns. I was reading a book where the author was talking about like if you were to eliminate everything in the gym, right? Everybody, you go to a packed out gym and you just remove all the equipment. And then after you remove all the equipment, people are still doing the same exercises, right? If I'm doing a bicep curl, right, and then you just remove the dumbbell, I'm still doing a bicep curl, right? But what he was saying was when you look at that and you look at what people are doing, people are still training these primary movement patterns in some way. And so when I look at training the general population or busy professionals more specifically, I look at training these movement patterns because it's going to help make their day to day much more efficient. And they're going to be able to get through their day easier without pain. Just to name a couple of things, they're able just to do life again. And that's like how I approach exercise and how, when you're talking about functional training, how it should be approached. These are your primary movement patterns, and this is how we're training those things. Not training muscles to just look a certain way. I mean, will muscles define and develop and tone up if you're training specific movement patterns? 100%. because you can't train movement patterns and build muscle without training and building that specific muscle. But are you doing it in isolation of that muscle? Definitely not, right? I'm not only doing lateral raises, right? Or I'm only looking at smaller muscle groups. I'm looking at the muscle as a whole. And all muscles within that, the stabilizers, the primary movers, are all being worked in some form or fashion if I'm training movement patterns. So again, functional training, training movement patterns translates into real world activities, right? Your training movements focus on exercises that mimic everyday activity, and even sports specific movements, right? Which is, if you look at training athletes or training students who are becoming athletes, you're training the main drivers, right? Or their movement patterns they do specifically in a sport, specific movements and everyday functional activities, carrying groceries in, things like that. Also, with this approach, right, it enhances our ability to just make everyday activities easier, right? How many people get up in and out of a chair and they like groan, they stand up out of a chair and they go, ugh, right? Or they sit back down and they like kind of sigh in relief, right? Mostly we thought like this would be our parents just doing this, but now we've all caught ourselves doing the exact same thing, right? Or getting up off of the floor with playing with a kid, right? Or playing with your kids, and you're just like, ugh. Or just you're making like all of these noises that you thought only applied to your parents or to your grandparents, but now we're making the same grunts and things like that. By training specific movement patterns, right, we're eliminating that. We're giving our bodies the ability to make activities like this easier. Or think about moving. Like I just recently moved, and being able to carry boxes from the moving truck into my apartment, moving them around within my apartment, become that much easier. Or, like I said earlier, carrying groceries. Right? There are stairs in my apartment, so being able to carry the groceries from my car up the stairs and being able to put them away, all become that much easier by training movement patterns over just muscle groups. Right? It also helps to translate to developing coordination, which can improve balance, which can improve decreasing our chances of falling, things like that. Again, functional everyday, making just our everyday movement patterns easy, right? As we get older and as we age, we start to notice that our balance isn't what it used to be. And so if we're able to train specific movements, right, we're improving that coordination, we're improving that balance overall. And so then looking kind of at the muscles themselves, we're integrating multiple muscle groups, right? We talked about in the very beginning, bodybuilding. Bodybuilding focuses very specifically on what a one isolated muscle looks like. When you train movement patterns, we are training all of the muscle groups, right? We're not just hitting chest that day. We're not just doing quads or hamstrings, right? We're not just isolating one muscle group. We're looking at all of the muscle groups as a whole and how they work together to allow this movement pattern to happen. Another benefit to this, right, is being able to, we work with a lot of busy professionals, right? Corporate individuals, those that have full-time 9-to-5s, have a family, those who have a lot of things going on in their schedules already. We look at how do we make exercise more efficient for them. And so if we're training movement patterns, right, we can decrease the amount of time that we're spending in the gym because we're working multiple muscle groups at a time. And so our energy becomes a little bit more efficient. Our time becomes a little bit more efficient in the gym without taking away or having to spend hours upon hours in the gym. I use bodybuilding as a reference because it is a complete contrast to training movement patterns. But look at a lot of bodybuilders, talk to bodybuilders that you might know, they spend 2, 3, sometimes 4 hours in the gym working on that specific muscle. But if we're somebody that doesn't have that kind of time, then we need to have a program or a plan that's going to be a little bit more efficient. And if we're training multiple muscle groups at one time, there's the efficiency that we need to be able to come in, to leave our jobs, come into the gym, get the things done that we need to do, and then head home to be with our family and not have to worry about anything else outside of that. We never want to take away from family time. On top of being able to work multiple muscle groups, right? This concept, right, promotes better muscle balance and symmetry, right? Because they're learning to work together. Is there a muscle group that is overcompensating for another muscle group, or is one, more efficient than the other? It helps to create symmetry and balance, right? Reduces our chance of injury as we age and as we get older. And then the last third point, right, is training movement patterns enhances our stability, mobility, and core strength, right? We talked about core being a huge aspect to just our life in general and our bodies, because if we didn't have a core, right, we would just be arms attached to arms and legs attached to legs, and then we would just be very small little individual people. We would just be also like a puddle of mush. Because our spine is what keeps us upright, creates our posture. And if we're not creating core strength, core stability, we're not protecting our spine. And so if we're able to train movement patterns, right? Squat, lunge, hinge, push, pull, some kind of core activity, we're enhancing our stability and our mobility overall, right? This movement-based style training emphasizes those three things that are essential for better posture and better alignment. Again, we talked as we're aging, right? Our balance is decreasing, and you notice, right? You've all noticed, we all have that one grandparent that for some reason, as we get older, they seem to be getting smaller, right? They're shortening, right? They're getting shorter, and you're like, when I was a kid, you were like the Jolly Green Giant. You're huge. One, I was a tiny itty bitty thing, but also like you had better posture when you were younger, right? But as we age, we start to round a little bit more. We start to hunch a little bit more. And so training specific movement patterns, right? This movement based style training, right, helps to improve our posture and improve our alignment overall. We think of big muscle groups. We don't think of small muscle groups. And so by this movement-based style of training, we're able to target those small muscle groups and have them work. And that actually might end up giving us the aesthetic look that we want. And then overall, like, we're improving our abdominal muscles, our low back. We're making all of those areas stronger. We're improving hip mobility, which is going to decrease common pains that we might have as we're aging. Low back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain, elbow pain. All of these different joints start to ache after a while, and as we get older from underuse. And so if we're training our everyday movement patterns, they're also targeting these specific joints as well. And so we look at just kind of the proper biomechanics of all of those. This is movement-based style of training, functional training over just isolation bodybuilding style of workouts. A completely different approach to exercise. Looks at a good bit of creating more longevity within exercise, and gives you just a more relaxed approach, I would say. But if you're somebody that is looking to find a training program or a style of training that's going to allow you to get more time back in your schedule, and help you essentially move pain-free and allows your daily activities to seem that much easier, then I would definitely encourage you to check out this kind of style of training. Now, this is what I do with most of all of my clients, is a movement-based style of training where we're developing your individual movement patterns based off of any imbalances that you might have, and correcting those things specifically to you as the individual. But I would definitely encourage you to look at this style of training and how it could benefit you in the long run and over anything else. I hope you guys liked this topic. I hope you learned something new from it. If you do me a favor, just hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. It helps me to know that you guys enjoyed this and helps me to continue making videos like this for you guys. So I love education. I love teaching you guys about fitness. I love fitness education. Just put the two together. But again, I hope you guys liked it, and make sure that you follow along, and let me know if you have any questions about stuff.